few strange fan hypotheses about the 1997 epic, Titanic. The most notable of these is the one that says Jack Dawson was a person who goes back and forth through time who came from the future to keep Rose from hopping into the frigid Atlantic. This prompted a change obviously for the Titanic's destiny. How, you may inquire. All things considered, whenever Rose had without a doubt bounced into the water, the boat would have halted to take into consideration a pursuit and salvage exertion. This would have deferred the Titanic to where hotter climate appeared, which means more clear perceivability and ta-da, no mishap. This is all as indicated by a similar hypothesis obviously. Primus player placeholder. An extended adaptation of this hypothesis says that Jack wasn't just a person who goes back and forth through time who referenced things that hadn't existed in 1912, for example, Lake Wissota and the crazy ride on the Santa Monica Pier, yet he was sent explicitly from a similar future where Skynet took over Earth. His central goal, to ensure the precursor of John Connor who was as a matter of fact Rose DeWitt Bukater. This obviously implies that Jack hailed from the Terminator universe and that Rose was grandma to Sarah Connor who in the long run brought forth John Connor who, thus, turned into the head of the Resistance. Loki is quite possibly the most mainstream characters in the Marvel Universe, notwithstanding his inclination for deceiving those nearest to him and shapeshifting into other Marvel characters to ridicule them. Devotees of the Lord of Wickedness have thought of intriguing speculations with respect to Loki's past appearances in Marvel films and what he might be up to while standing by to revisitation of the silver screen. One of the most suffering hypotheses is that Loki didn't kick the bucket on account of Thanos in Avengers: Infinity War, yet rather appeared to the purple Scalawag as a reflected picture of himself. At that point danced off to Valhalla to talk with Odin. Information is given in the scenes where the normally right gave Loki utilizes his left hand to employ weapons. Remembers the scene for Dark World when Loki fakes his own demise just as the scene in which he endeavors to wound Thanos before the miscreant lifts him up and gags him. Those siblings have affirmed that Loki to be sure capitulated to Thanos' stranglehold, however stalwart fans will not trust it, and want to clutch the above hypothesis all things considered. The Wicked Witch of the East is a character put on the map by the mainstream kids' story The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. She was a moderately aged dictator who wore silver shoes and constrained the Munchkins into bondage. The point when the 1939 melodic film, in view of the story, was delivered, the silver shoes were changed to ruby shoes. Wicked Witch broadly met her end when Dorothy's home arrived on her in the wake of being cleared up by a tornado. Nothing was left from the Wicked Witch aside from the ruby shoes which Dorothy at that point began wearing. An hypothesis recommends that Dorothy had an equal partner, which was as a matter of fact the Wicked Witch. Likewise clarify, as indicated by the hypothesis, why the ruby shoes fit Dorothy consummately when she gave them a shot. Hypothesis spins around Dorothy not having had a fantasy, however rather having been shipped off another reality where she runs into the substitute rendition of herself, the Wicked Witch. The witch was squashed toward the start of the film, Dorothy just had her spot in that specific reality. The adored wrinkly extra-earthly, E.T. Made for a record-breaking film in 1982, outperforming Star Wars to turn into the most elevated netting film ever at that point. One of the abused misrepresentations began from this film, to be specific, E.T. Telephone home. E.T. really says, E.T. Home telephone, after which Elliot and Gertie both state, E.T. Telephone home, which is the place where the disarray came in. E.T. Additionally, the wellspring of many fan speculations, including the out of sight that asserts the charming minimal outsider is truth be told, a Jedi. Backstory of this hypothesis incorporates Steven Spielberg and George Lucas being in film school together and turning out to be dear companions. Besides, there are two references to Star Wars in E.T. Additionally, in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, delivered in 1999, the representatives of the Galactic Senate intently look like E.T. In E.T. The extraterrestrial, E.T. sets out directly toward a stunt or treater dressed as Yoda while mumbling, home. As for the hypothesis, implies that Yoda and E.T. simultaneously, and since Jedi Knights comprise of an assortment of animal varieties, all things both black Black Panther and The Lion King are wonderful films. Also, when fans began seeing likenesses that integrated the two movies, a hypothesis was brought into the world that said Black Panther could be a current human variant of The Lion King. This hypothesis predominantly relies on the previously mentioned similitudes which incorporate both primary characters having an expired dad and feeling shameful of climbing their holding up seat. Likewise have a malicious relative attempting to usurp the seat. Nala and Simba both have solid moms who start to leave the pack during turmoil. The two of them have love intrigues who disclose to them they are not to fault for their family misfortunes, and the two characters battle for the seat toward the end. Ultimately, the two movies were gigantic blockbusters set in Africa despite the fact that Wakanda is an anecdotal kingdom. We should not fail to remember that John Connie, who played T'Challa's dad in Black Panther, initially voiced Rafiki in the true-to-life Lion King film delivered in 2019. The Harry Potter wonder began with a progression of colossally mainstream books which poured out over into a progression of similarly well-known motion pictures. Films rejuvenated a large group of otherworldly animals close by Harry and his companions, including trolls, apparitions, a three-headed canine, savages, mythical beasts, unicorns, sprites, singing frogs and werewolves. Of the most unnerving animals came as a Dementor. These creatures feed on the joy of people, leaving them in a discouraged state. Dementors in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban have the ability to suck out an individual's spirit through their mouth, which leaves the sad individual in a vegetative state. Dementors were exceptionally pulled into Harry Potter himself, sticking to his fragrance at each chance. And hypothesis recommends that Harry housed more soul than the normal human or wizard witch, since he likewise held piece of Voldemort's spirit. In these lines, there was much more to acquire for the Dementors, as they would in fact secure two spirits, at the cost of one. Twilight Saga isn't some tea, yet by the books and ensuing films rounded up millions, individually. Sundown Fever held the world when the principal film was delivered in 2008 and Team Jacob and Team Edward turned into a genuine thing. Those who scorn the motion pictures, regularly base their emotions on the huge number and abnormality that they present, including the Edward got Bella pregnant situation, the we sparkle in the sun disaster, and the by and large stockery frighteningness of Edward Cullen. Of the establishment have volunteered to compensate for the many plot openings and peculiar happenings in the motion pictures by concocting a few speculations. It incorporates Bella being part werewolf, giving motivation to Jacob to engrave on Renesmee. Their hypothesis gathers that Bella is dropped from vampires since her mom's name is Renee, which comes from Renatus, of which the female structure is Renata. Renata is the name of a vampire watch with the uncommon force of redirecting actual attacks. The glittery vampire skin. One more hypothesis has it that the Cullens are not really vampires, however fairies, which evidently would clarify their affection for the forested areas and their sparkliness. You heard the one that says Jacob Black is essential for the Black family in the Harry Potter universe. Association was made in light of the fact that Harry Potter's adoptive parent is Sirius Black and an animagus. Who can handle his change into a monster wolf, is conjectured to be an animagus too, and hence a mystical piece of the Harry Potter world. Pitch Perfect gave the world a cappella mashups, Rebel Wilson in cringy scenes and the performing voice of Anna Kendrick. Main film in the establishment turned into a sleeper hit and got generally sure surveys. Two spin-offs that followed were likewise hits, regardless of whether the last film got generally blended pundit reviews. Musical comedies are not normally analyzed for shrouded messages, etc., yet fans actually made future time up with explicit hypotheses for this specific film establishment. Obviously, one of these speculations state that on the grounds that Kendrick sounds a ton like Kubrick, there is a ton of equals between Pitch Perfect and the narrative Room 237, which clearly implies that Pitch Perfect is an on-screen descent of 9/11. Is given through a farce YouTube video in which the storyteller expresses that it is no mishap that the primary rivalry in the main film is held in New York. Calls attention to that the Treblemakers do movement that incorporates plane movements, and a sign in the group peruses, a cappella as my co-pilot. Teller likewise dimly alludes to the Barden Bellas being wearing airline steward regalia when they enter the stage for their set. The Treblemakers comprise of 9 individuals while there are 11 Barden Bellas. Bush gets a notice as well, and things simply get more tangled red, amazingly bizarre after that. John Wick is probably the coolest character to have graced film screens lately. Fans couldn't get enough of the principal film, and its fame guaranteed a further 2 continuations, with one more. 2 motion pictures got ready for 2022 and beyond. Thus Keanu Reeves additionally featured in the Matrix film establishment. It didn't take long for a fan hypothesis to raise its head. Hypothesis says, hang tight for it, John Wick is in the Matrix. Matrix film, Neo attempts to escape the PC world, and in John Wick, John attempts to escape the criminal world. Most intrigue scholars, that is a very sizable amount of confirmation that the personality of John Wick was as yet in the Matrix over the span of the film. There is the hypothesis that says John Wick is in a real sense set in a computer game universe, which is said to clarify the negligible response of spectators and law authorization to the ruthless viciousness that happens all through the film. DC film universe is overflowing with fan speculations that endeavor to fill plot openings and make beginning stories for characters with dark foundations. These hypotheses incorporate the one where Martha Wayne fakes her own demise and becomes Martha Kent, the Joker and Harley Quinn having youngsters that were murdered by Batman and Superman at last slaughtering off Alfred Pennyworth. Wonder Woman is a necessary piece of the DC universe and has not gotten away from theory by the same token. Hypothesis depends on Diana and Moana both living on wonderful islands, wearing comparable attire and being under the thumb of oppressive imperial guardians. Perhaps the most suffering hypotheses about Diana Prince has it that she and Moana are a similar individual. That Moana lives that energize and move them, kick the bucket, and both go from little youngsters, carrying on with life on an island, to champions.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me, even if it's fake.